Yes, at long last, it's Sports Night with Talkback, presented by you. It's your views on BBC's sports coverage we're going to air tonight with the man responsible for it all, Brian Cowgill. And to tell him what they think about his programmes, just a few of the many, many viewers who've written to us. I hope we'll get around to expressing your own particular view in the course of the next half hour. And I know that many of you are concerned about our first topic because this is the sort of thing that drew the largest number of letters from many thousands we received.
Peters again. This is Knowles, and he's looking back towards the goalkeeper. Oh, he's got himself in a mess, Garland! And Garland! Chris Garland had not the courage to go on. He'd got time, he'd got an empty net, and they're complaining bitterly to Knowles now, and no wonder. Now look at this. Garland panicked a little bit then. And he has had the chance there of his first goal for Chelsea, and away he'll never get another.
Mahoney, forward for Conroy, the flag is down, Wilson off his line. Oh! And Conroy, having had the luck with the rebound off Wilson, hit the crossbar. He just wasn't meant to score.
Now, Frank Churchwood, those excerpts are, of course, most unfair to the commentators to take such a snippet out of 90 minutes of football, out of the many hours they've commentated. But we do have to try to illustrate a point. Was your point illustrated there?
Yes, very briefly. We knew there was an empty net. We knew he hit the side netting. And, you know, I wish BBC, which does an excellent job of coverage, would do an excellent job with their commentators by emblazoning over every one of their microphones the words, "I must remember that TV is a visual medium," because commentary is so often unnecessary. And when they talk through, above and over a match, particularly at the climax of that match, it becomes extremely irritating. And of all outdoor broadcasts, surely the sports fixture is the one that brings in the most specialist audience. The man that knows something about the game, that knows something about the rudimentary tactics and rules.
Right, before I go to Brian Cowgill for an answer to that, let me turn to Claire Pernott first of all, because I think you have views along similar lines.
I do.
Could you express them?
Well, I wonder why we have to have a sound radio commentary, because that's what it amounts to. And if I watch sport, I watch it because I want to hear the sounds of the crowd, the crowds, the audience there, the oohs and the ahs and the groans. And I wonder if the commentator really wonders if we can't hear when there's a goal, because we'd hear the shout. Instead of that, we get this awful non-stop gabble.
Right, Brian Cowgill, fundamentally the criticism is too much talk in a visual medium.
Well, the excerpts from the two matches we saw, the first one was a clip from the League Cup semi-final between Chelsea and Tottenham, and the miss you saw was in the context of a very thrilling match which ended, was decided by the odd goal in 5, I think. And it was a miss like that in the latter stages of the match that it influenced the commentator as it influenced the crowd and as it influenced the millions of people watching at home in that context. Now, not for a moment am going to claim that our commentators don't have red blood in their veins. And to that extent, they echo the emotion, the drama, the sway, the ebb and the flow, which is experienced by every red-blooded spectator and at the ground and every interested onlooker at home. Of course, they occasionally get excited, but they get honestly excited in the context of the match. They are seeking to be heard above a chorus of 60,000 people who in that first occasion were undoubtedly in full cry on behalf of Chelsea. And while it is said that of course, we can see all these things for ourselves. In fact, in the moment of actuality, you'd be quite surprised how much you rely upon the confirmation of the commentator that a goal has been scored or not.
Can I come in there? Talking about confirmation, there's not only the confirmation of the commentator, but of course of the picture, because there's an action replay. Now, Mrs. Penny, would you say that, following up the point you made about just wanting to watch and listen to the crowd, would you want to watch and listen to the crowd all over again in slow motion without any commentary?
No, but I don't think that's relevant. I think the action replay is so stupid. I think it's come down to the level now of stupidity, because Sports Night with Coleman comes along, and then the goals could be discussed at length without having them pushed in after each goal, because I think it makes it rather ludicrous.
I wonder, going up to back row there, Arthur Edwards, what's your view of this immediate and, of course, technically impressive action replay?
Well, is it technically impressive?
I find it so, even though I'm in the game.
Well, I think sports coverage is ruined by excessive use of the close-up camera. I think it's common sense to me that to appreciate any sport, you must be able to see 50% of the field. To me, it's more like a mannequin parade.
Well, now we are.
I mean, with the clip that we've just seen, I mean, I'm curious now, when he shot for that goal, was there a better position where he could have passed to someone else to put it in the net? How do you know? I mean, you've got to be able to see the field of play, surely.
Can the camera, Brian Cowgill, I think this is really the question, be really in the position of a man who's at a match who can see it all, and should it try to show more?
Yes, the camera can be in a very privileged position at a match, on the centre line, detached from the game and showing the whole of the picture. But at any given moment in time, the director of that football match, the television producer, has up to 4 pictures being fed to him from 4 different cameras. And to answer the point that has just been raised about that particular incident, I will wager on the quality of a very brilliant football director that the reason he didn't cut away from that close-up, that there was no recipient on the ball. To that extent, of course, the viewer is taking, as he must always, in this situation, the judgment of the television director.
Brian Cowgill having a wager already. We're going to come to betting in a minute, actually, on this sport thing, but I'm going to move on.
Another point there, which is part of the same criticism, I feel. Of course, it would be very simple, and it used to happen, that football and various other team games, because of our lack of equipment, not to mention expertise, were covered much more simply on one camera or 2 cameras, which by and large preserved a wider angle of the whole of the match. Now that shot is still the master shot and crucial to our coverage. But as camera lenses have become closer, as the whole appeal of sport has widened out far beyond the specialist interests that an earlier speaker mentioned, then so television has attracted that wider audience by not showing the tactics of a match in chessboard fashion, but it has, by closer cameras, been able to show that outside of the tactics there is a clash of wills and temperament going on down there, of drama and emotion, which to many people, not necessarily the specialists interested in sport, has become one of the most attractive features of this coverage.
Even, of course, in Talkback,
because when
like
we talk about specialist audiences, I'm sorry if I may just finish this one point.
Oh, all right, very briefly.
Very briefly.
A lot more to talk
the
about.
specialist audience for Match of the Day, for instance, is now 14 million people, of which I don't know how many are specialists in football knowledge. I do know that on a good day, 1 million go through the turnstiles to football.
Right. Can we move on to the back row there, to Alan King, because you have a rather different point to make.
Yes, I'd like to appeal for a wider coverage of teams and personalities on football matches on the television. We seem to get a great deal of Manchester United, Leeds, Manchester United, Arsenal, Manchester United again, and we see these managers, Don Revie, Joe Mercer, Don Revie, Brian Clough, Don Revie. Can't we have a wider selection of teams and a wider selection of personalities interviewed on matches and on sports programmes? How do you select the teams and the people that you televise?
Well, if you can bear with me, I'm afraid it takes longer than 30 seconds to reply to that, but you may be interested in the reply, which sums up the complexity of televised football and its choice. As a matter of fact, to answer your first question, Manchester United have appeared on our screen 7 times since the season began in the context of 54 matches, and for the top box office draw in the country, not to mention the leaders of the Football League. I don't think that is overdoing it, since it is not really a very significant or an over-significant fraction. However, how the matches are chosen is the product of a complicated system evolved now over many years between the television companies, and I mean those of the ITV as well as the BBC, and the Football League. And since parity of coverage is roughly the aim of the football authorities, therefore a system of selection has been evolved to try and ensure the fairest possible distribution. And what happens is very simple. Before the season begins, myself and Sam Leach meet with the representatives of ITV, and like all good football matches begin, we spin a penny. And depending upon who calls heads and who calls tails, then either ITV or the BBC have first choice of the matches in any particular month. If I win, then I take August, they take September, and so on during the season. That is the first determining factor. The second, and I'm trying to be brief about a very complicated situation, is that our demands for football coverage differ as between the BBC and ITV. BBC's, by and large, is a network affair in England, Wales and Northern Ireland of 2 matches per week. ITV go in for a more regional policy and can be televising up to 7 matches per week, sometimes more. And so therefore the winner of the toss for any particular month, if it's me, then I choose the first match. They then choose 3 regional matches. I choose my second match, and so on. In the month of their first choice, they will choose 3 regional matches. I will then choose our first match. They will choose a 4th match, and then my second match. So on some occasions, of course, the second BBC match is occasionally the 5th match to be chosen.
That's a lot of detail there.
Yes.
I want to get on, Brian, if we may, to other points.
I'm sorry, but I'm just trying to really to underline the fact that it isn't straightforwardly a simple choice of saying, well, I'll take that, you take that.
Right, that's some of the detail. Now let's get on to some more generalised criticism. Where's Mr. Howe?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My point concerns the balance of types of programme that the Sports Service puts on. Speaking entirely personally, I would like to see rather less time devoted to commentary on matches of the day and instant news and instant comment by managers and other experts, and rather more time devoted to, shall we say, more documentary type of sports programme, which tries to put sport into a wider context. For example, it would be fascinating if the BBC could treat us to an examination of changing tactics in soccer down the last 20 years. They must have some splendid film which they could use for this purpose. It would be interesting to have programmes detailing the changing economic circumstances of the soccer industry. It would be fascinating to look at the sociology of sport, the changing types who play, the changing types who go, the changing types of behaviour at soccer grounds.
Well, there are quite a lot of good ideas, or I shouldn't say good, I suppose, I'm a chairman, impartial, but the ideas, would you accept covering that kind of topic, Brian Cowgill?
Yes, I would, because it interests me very much.
Well, the question is, why don't you?
Well, the answer is that we do not cover this so much in separate programmes, but very much are these social, economic and tactical changes and developments a part of our continuing sports coverage. You see, there is no doubt about it that in the as far as the two major BBC One programs, for instance, Sports Night and Match of the Day, which are watched by a total of 25 million people per week between them, which is an enormous number of people, the vast majority of that particular audience is more interested in coverage of the major events than it is about talk about them or the politics behind them. But within that context, we have, I believe, tried hard in various stories to share the experience of various of these top sporting performers, to get at some of the issues that are alive at any moment in time. And indeed, in the context of football, I do believe myself that it was through the coverage of the World Cup in 1966 that perhaps football as a television subject in this country, thanks, I believe, to the BBC coverage, became not simply a popular entertainment, which it has always been and long may continue, but became a very serious subject in the current affairs sense.
There is,
I do
of course,
believe that to be true.
Clearly no question about popularity, but there are a lot of other questions, like one a schoolmaster I think would like to put now, Trevor Cox.
Yes, my concern is with the question of professionalism. One of David Coleman's cliches or favourite sayings is after a match has been played, in his summary, this was a thoroughly professional team. And in that match, we've probably seen 20 instances of the rules being violated, the rules of soccer, and I, as a teacher, try to inculcate into my children the idea of keeping to the rules, and yet we get them held up by the BBC as these thoroughly professional people do all kinds of things on the field which would horrify us as teachers of the young.
Well, while you're talking about children, let me move to someone, he'd hit me if I called him at the age of 13 a child, the young man, Anthony Jones. Do you echo what a schoolmaster says there about BBC sports coverage?
Yes, in one aspect especially about Mr. Coleman, when he makes his commentaries on European games, I always find he is biased towards an England team when they play teams like Switzerland or Austria. And I think that in the game against Switzerland, he was always towards the England midfield three when the Swiss were getting on top and forcing towards goal. And in the end, they did manage a 1-1 draw.
In a sense, it's the same kind of criticism, isn't it? That children or young viewers are being given the wrong kind of values in sport. Brian Cowgill.
Yes, it is, and I think it's something we take very seriously. However, on the two questions quoted, I cannot believe, since I have never personally heard and would not expect to hear him because he's far too great a commentator for that, David Coleman condone bad sportsmanship by any team or any performer in the cause of professionalism. I just do not believe that, and I cannot, I'm afraid, personally recall that occasion. But I think in terms of the behaviour on the field and our responsibility in passing this on, well, it's very tricky because the only flat answer is, well, then we must doctor it and cut it out. And we must never be able to lip read an expletive uttered in the heat of the moment on the football field, and we must never see anybody spit. And in the context of sport, people don't spit for bad manners; they do it as a form of relief and this sort of thing. Are you suggesting that all that is cut out?
Well, I think it's bad to show youngsters that because they're very impressionable at the
Yes,
age
I
of
take that point.
8, 9, and 10, and this is their whole life. Football, soccer, and among your 14 million viewers, even at that age, match of the day, they're watching, they see all these moves,
Actually,
and they come into...
Well,
I'm very interested, actually, to ask how impressed you feel they are and how you observe that in them copying these things.
To put examples, professional footballers never go back 10 yards, 12 yards from the ball. They've got to be pushed back. They always argue with the referee any decision which goes against them. At the throw-in, they must always gain 2 or 3 yards from the place they should throw it in.
What are you then asking for from television sports coverage? Are you asking David Coleman, or whoever the commentator may be, to give a kind of sermon at this point and say to any young people listening, this is unsportsmanlike and shouldn't happen? What are you asking for?
Equating this question of thoroughly professional with being good sportsmen. This is my quarrel, really. And if this is the thoroughly professional, and the professionals are the top of their skills, all youngsters look at the professional.
Yes.
And if he is doing what should be done, they do tend to copy him.
Yes.
Anthony Jones, are you as key? Do you live for football, as it was said so many do? You do. I know you live for some other criticism which you made in your letter, which was about the timing of the programmes, as I remember it.
Yes, I think with children of my age, 10 o'clock, we can usually see the first half, but then have to go to bed. But with children even younger than ourselves that stay up to watch the match in school next morning, they've got bags under their eyes down here.
Well, there's a straightforward criticism.
And I do sympathise with that, believe me, because it is it's one of the most frequent sources of complaint and correspondence that we get. However, the football authorities, again, after many years of discussion and negotiation with the television authorities, believe that football on the screen before 10 o'clock in the evening of the day the match is played is likely seriously to affect the attendances at the football grounds. In this, they have a very considerable point, which, as a matter of fact, is at the basis of their attitude towards television.
And you presumably are at their mercy. I mean, if they say you can't show it until such and such a time, you can't. Is that right?
In one sense, one is at their mercy, but I don't want to imply that I don't understand that problem. I think everybody does, because television and the viewer is no better off if, in fact, overexposure of the sport diminishes attendances at the grounds, and therefore leads to further inroads on the system of football in this country. Not only professional football, I might add, since at the same time, of course, there are many hundreds of amateur games also involved in this game of association football, which also, I guess, require the same sort of protection.
Well, sport isn't, of course, all soccer, is it? It's
no, it isn't.
Racing too. John Tanner-Smith, you better come in here.
My concern is the absolute priority which is given to horse racing over any other sport. It appears that no matter what the situation is with the previous event, that if a horse race is due to come on, then we're taken over to the race course, not to see the race itself, but to see all the rigmarole leading up to the race. The parade round the ring, the mounting of the jockeys, the canter up the track into the stalls or the starting gate, wherever it may be. The race itself may be only 20% of what is shown on the television. And then, after that, we go back to the unsaddling enclosure and we go through the prices at which the horses were placed at. It appears to me that this is playing, or pandering, to the betting industry particularly. It's not just the race itself we're covering, it's the whole event, which is, I think, far too much of the race itself.
Well, I said we'd move on to this topic. The charge is that you're pandering, amongst other things, to the betting industry. Cowgill.
I don't think that we are, in that sense, pandering to the betting industry. I think for 3 times 15 minutes of a Saturday afternoon, on an occasional midweek afternoon, we are recognising the facts of life and providing a service to many millions of people who have been known to have a flutter on the GGs.
If you're not pandering to betting, there are people I know who would say you're pandering to racing itself and to soccer as the two sports that hog the screen. And I think, Ray Battersby, you want to come in on this?
Yes, well, my point is that most of the sport is taken up by racing and football. In fact, I did a survey of the last 4 weeks of the sports coverage, given by the BBC, and in fact, 75% of all the time taken up by sport on television is given to 4 sports, namely racing, football, rugby, and tennis.
You've done your sums, now that's an accurate figure.
This is 73% to be exact, and all the rest are way behind. Now, my particular sport is motorcycling, And it seems to me that the sports that are given on, shown on television are those that are subsidised by industry. You know, the type of things such as show jumping, golf, tennis, where they're heavily backed by sponsors. Now, what does motorcycling have to do to be shown on television?
That's the question.
Well, can I answer the first part first? Your survey has been over the last 3 or 4 weeks of the end of 71 and the beginning of 72, which I think anybody would probably weigh up as just about, in the overall sense of sport, the dog days of the year. And in the context of over 1,000 hours of sport, which will be televised on BBC One and BBC Two in this Olympic year, perhaps it puts your worry into some perspective if I say that no more than 100 of those hours will be football, which is not an overlarge proportion for the national sport, and that the rest of those 1,000 hours will be spent on up to 30 major and minor sports, all of which over the course of the year and in their part in the calendar find their place in the BBC's sporting service.
There are, I suppose, some minor sports that never get a showing at all. I wonder whether Brian English wants to talk about this.
There are indeed many minor sports which don't seem to get a coverage. I get rather annoyed when I do see things like soccer and racing take up the time on screen. We get soccer, say, 2 or 3 times a week sometimes, but we get a game like volleyball once every 4 years. Now, if you were to see a game performed by the Japanese, you would really thrill to their movement. There are games like gymnastics which are shown every so often. There are games like basketball. And what about handball? This is an Olympic sport this year. It's one of the most popular sports in Europe. Yeah, I've never seen it on British television.
There's a question for you. What about handball?
Well, I agree entirely, because the Japanese volleyball team are a sight to behold, marvellously exciting, marvellously entertaining, but of course they don't really come to this country very often. And basketball standards, I'm happy to say it's growing here, but it is still not a sport that at world level is by any means at its best in this country. Ice hockey is by no means a flourishing game here, but flourishes in America and on the continent. And all of these sports, of course, find a place in the BBC coverage at occasions like World Championships and Olympic Games.
Does that, Anthony James, satisfy you as an answer?
Not really, because I would like to think that from these 100 hours of Olympic football, we
No,
could,
sorry, 100 hours of football.
From these 100 hours of football, I would like you to spare 100 seconds of time to give us some of the results of the Speedway World Championships, which will be running up to their conclusion at that time. We can't get Speedway results at all, even for the big, important matches.
I promise you, sir, that we are endeavouring to provide more than the results. We are endeavouring to provide full coverage of the World Speedway Championship at Wembley, which we did on the last occasion they were held there, and very successfully.
Yes, the last word from
Could
you.
we have a news service as such, just a short news service with results, say a 5-minute programme nightly, giving us all the sports, bring in speedway results, bring in athletic results, bring in a transfer, if you wish, of Jeff Hurst, £100,000, and then in cricket season not only give every 3 days just Yorkshire beat Derbyshire, Kent beat Gloucestershire, all the rest of the matches were drawn. Can't we have during the summer again, as we used to have at one time, the results of these matches, the actual scores, who scored 100, who got 50, who took 5 wickets?
Well, Brian Cowgill, as the last point here, you've had quite a number of constructive suggestions tonight. How would you respond to that? And in answering that, have you any news for us of plans for sport in 72?
Yes, I'd answer that point in saying that, of course, the sound services of the BBC do provide this on a daily basis and more frequently than once a day. And that television's not resisted is the wrong word, but it has never been tried in television because the sound services do provide that comprehensive summary which come up at fixed times, etc. And by and large, television news results services tend to become a bit of a drag without illustration, quite frankly.
Point taken. Any news at all about changes or news for the people who've made suggestions here about the way you're going to cover sport in 72?
Well,
quite briefly.
Obviously the year is dominated by the two Olympic Games, the Winter Olympic Games in Sapporo, which we leave to cover next week. And in terms of minority sport, and I don't feel myself that while minority sport is ever going to be satisfied with the amount it gets, I hope they're not feeling over-neglected, because I don't really feel they should. Because under the 5 Olympic rings of Sapporo, for instance, are sports like skiing, ski jumping, tobogganing, bobsleigh, all, I suppose, minority sports in our meaning of the sense, but marvellously worthwhile in that context.
One thing is for certain, nobody is ever satisfied, including our audience here, half of whom haven't had a chance to talk, but there'll be another night. That's it then for this week. Our thanks not only to everyone here, but to all the rest of you who wrote to us. We hope your point came up somewhere. I won't be here next week because of sport, darn it. Apparently an awful lot of you want to watch football in an extended sports night with Coleman, one of the FA Cup third round replays.